The Sleep Insight series invites listeners to learn about this amazing adventure we take every night called sleep. Through these insightful discussions, we examine sleep and our society's beliefs about sleep from a variety of angles. We hope you'll learn some cool new facts and analogies that you can use to help us raise awareness about this underappreciated 1/3 of our lives. Welcome to Project Sleep's podcast. Project Sleep is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness and advocating for sleep health, sleep equity, and sleep disorders. I'm your host, Julie Flygar. We're so glad you're here as we work together towards making sleep cool. On this podcast, all guests express their own opinions. While medical diagnoses and treatment options are discussed for educational purposes, this information should not be taken as medical advice. Each person's experience is so unique, which is why it's so important to always consult your own medical team when making decisions about your own health. If you haven't done so yet, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss a Project Sleep podcast episode. And if you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a rating or review wherever you listen so that we can reach more listeners and raise more awareness. Hello, I'm here with Tatiana. Hi, Tatiana.
Hi.
And we're so excited to have Tatiana here. Tatiana Maria Corbitt is a writer and multidisciplinary artist living in the Pacific Northwest. They have their MS in Applied Biological Sciences from Arizona State University, in addition to being published on narcolepsy.sleep/disorders.net. They will be published in Blood, Sweat, and Tears. We can't wait to get this publication, in which they write about their experience with narcolepsy in the outdoors and include two of their favorite original poems. Blood, Sweat, Tears can be ordered. And there's the website. You'll see this on our website. It's ruggedOutdoorswoman.com. And of course, please put in narcolepsy when you purchase this in the notes so Tatiana can be partially credited for any sales. Tatiana's first poetry book, Wild, I don't know how to say that word.
Brujeria.
Brujeria. Will be published by Curious Corvid Publishers and includes many references to living with narcolepsy. They are currently writing an autobiographical fiction fantasy novel starring a queer and narcoleptic ex-scientist who hikes into a new world. Ooh, it sounds so cool. The release date of this is to be determined. Tatiana spends their days reading, napping, writing, painting, and hiking with their German Shepherd service dog. So, how did you first get involved in the arts? You know, especially because you have such a scientific background as well. Did you always also have a passion for art and writing?
Actually, yes. So I was born hard of hearing, and so severely hard of hearing. And so growing up, it was just harder for me to get like access to language and stuff. So I really buried myself in books because it was accessible for me. And I loved that I could just dive in and exist like in a whole different world, and one which I knew what was going on. And so in college, I started painting as a way to deal with emotions, I guess, and just kind of, instead of having everything exist inside of me, being able to put it onto a page instead made it feel like safer to experience. Especially when my narcolepsy onset, I wasn't able to do like what I wanted to do, which was researching. I was doing immunological research on bats, and I ended up not being able to do that because of the severity of my symptoms. And so art was a way for me to put like my passion into something creative, and it helped me get through that really tough period of my life where I didn't really know where I was going to end up, but I was still, trying to like hang on.
So you were doing research on bats?
Yes, in the Sonoran Desert.
Whoa. Have you ever incorporated bats into your artwork?
I have, yeah. So I had this series of paintings where it was like local Sonoran Desert flora and fauna. And yeah, I do have a painting of bats. They're kind of surprisingly difficult to paint. but they are really cute in person. They're like little flying hamsters with big old ears. Oh my gosh.
And I guess, well, I'm kind of curious if have you ever had any hallucinations about bats?
No, actually, they're too cute.
Oh,
I'm not
if you,
scared of them.
all right. All right. That's good. I guess if you know them up close and personal, they're less.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, you just mentioned narcolepsy, but when do you feel like your symptoms really started?
It was my sophomore year of college, I believe. And I had a viral infection and I just really never recovered from it. And because after I got really sick, I started experiencing cataplexy and it was just very sudden. And all of a sudden, I wasn't able to stay awake longer than like 5 to 10 minutes. Even like driving, I was falling asleep behind the wheel in my neighborhood. And I knew something was very wrong. I just wasn't sure what it was. But luckily, because I had my background in like medical sciences, because I was pre med at the time, I had access to, I guess, the medical jargon and stuff, just like understanding what was going on. So I was able to like research more about it because some of the descriptions of cataplexy, for example, in medical terms are not very helpful.
Right. Like loss of muscle tone.
Yeah, loss of muscle tone. Like what do you mean? Like my muscles like shrivel? Like what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But yeah, and I was able to anyways get diagnosed.
Still in your sophomore year?
Yeah, actually, might have been into my junior year. It's kind of a blur. What matters is I was an honors student, like taking honors classes and like doing all of these extracurricular things and working multiple part-time jobs. And then this happens. It was just a lot to handle.
And it sounds like it came on really quickly. So, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I've heard people say when it's a really quick experience like that, it's almost like you can draw a line in the sand of like a person before versus like after.
Absolutely. It was really tough.
And what was next? Because I know it's been a long journey for you.
Yeah. Well, I managed to graduate and I ended up, because I was only able to work part-time because of the severity of my symptoms, even though they are being treated, I'm still like, very disabled from my symptoms. So I was living with my parents at the time, and that's when I started really painting and putting my passion into the arts. And at the time, I wasn't really able to read either because my medication journey has been a journey. And just when my symptoms are more severe, I'm not able to sit down and focus on the page. So, really, with like painting, I could fall asleep and still keep painting, like in between sleep and awake. And it kind of affected how my art came out in the end, but in like interesting, good ways. So it was accessible for me and continues to be.
And now, did you start with more like watercolors or acrylics, or what kind? And is it mostly because I've seen some of your like where you bring different mediums together too.
Yeah, acrylics are my favorite. That's what I mostly worked with. And it was nice because acrylics require like drying in between stages. And so, I could work on it for a little bit, paint, paint, paint. And then of course, I start like having sleep attacks. So I go take a nap, but I wake up and then it's dry. And I'm like, okay, time for the next layer.
Yeah, that's nice. Kind of goes with the flow of having, I guess, fragmented wakefulness and sleep.
Yes, indeed. So when I first started having cataplexy, I didn't know what the heck it was. I thought I had like a brain tumor or something. Like it happened so suddenly and I remember at the time, like I started laughing and I fell to the ground and then I started crying and like to my family I looked crazy. But what my experience was, I started laughing. I suddenly lost like the ability to hold up my body. I became like completely paralyzed. And so I fell to the ground and then obviously like it hurts and I started crying because I was like, what the heck is wrong with my body? Why is this happening? Something is very wrong. But in the beginning, I was having cataplexy attacks like that, full body, like 40 times a day. And, from the outside, it's hard to know exactly what's going on unless you're experiencing it yourself.
Yeah, that's a lot. Cataplexy.
Yeah. It
Ugh.
was a lot. My knees are messed up from that time because of like having to like try to lock them to keep from falling. So they like click a lot now.
Mm, that's really tough. Do you remember the first time that you incorporated your experience with narcolepsy into your artwork?
Yes, it actually was this painting of like clouds and eyes. And the eyes go from open to halfway closed to closed. And I felt like it depicted like the dreamy quality of narcolepsy and just like the opening and closing of the eyes. I feel like that's such a big when I have sleep attacks, it's like my head like nods, and my eyes open and close. And it's just I thought it was a beautiful depiction of that.
And the eyes are in clouds or
They're like in front of the clouds. It's kind of hard to explain unless you're looking at it.
that is so cool. I love that. And then catch me up on when you start, because I know you said you loved reading as a
hmm
kid, but when did you start really writing?
Ooh.
Well, that's a weird way. I mean, not really writing, like, but
Mhm.
like, were you always kind of like writing as a kid too?
I wrote some poetry as a kid, but I started really writing. I started working on my novel, the autobiographical fictional novel, when my parents kicked me out because of I wasn't able to work and they just couldn't understand what was going on. In reality, it was because my narcolepsy was severe, and also I came out as queer, and they just couldn't handle like all of the changes. But when that happened, I started writing, turning my story into like a fantasy world. And in that way, I was able to like feel like I had more control over what was going on in my life. And that was like 3 or 4 years ago. And now I'm like almost done with the novel, but it's still been a journey. And that was also around the time when I was able to start writing articles for Health Union Narcolepsy. And I was able to start sharing like my experiences with narcolepsy and receiving validation like through the community in that way. And feeling like I'm able to actually help people by sharing my experiences and validate other people's experiences that are similar or even different, but still within the same realm of narcolepsy. Like, I guess with writing, I feel like even though it's a solitary thing, there's still connection in the end. And it's also more accessible for me because I can, write a few sentences, start falling asleep, and then go take a nap, and come back to it.
Is that something where you ever feel like you're still writing as you fall asleep? I know because you said with art, visual arts, it kind of, I just, the reason I ask is because when I worked on my book, I actually found it really challenging to remember like where I was sort of as I'm falling asleep. And I'd like to say there was some sort of like strength to that fogginess, but I found it kind of hard for my writing anyway.
It is difficult in a lot of senses when you're trying to like convey, let's say, like scientific information into an article. That part of it is hard.
Yeah.
But when it comes to poetry, I feel like I am able to write poetry in and out of sleep, and it comes out just like more dreamy, and I am able to access different parts of my brain while I'm writing as well. And so it does affect my writing of poetry in like a very artistic, special way.
I love that. I guess I got to be writing some poetry. I haven't,
Do it.
I have some as a kid. I wrote poetry as a kid, but not as an adult. But I love reading poetry. So,
Yeah, go for it.
all right. I'm inspired. Maybe next year we'll have a poetry workshop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you facing sleep issues or a sleep disorder? Project Sleep is now excited to have the Sleep Helpline, a nonprofit-led free national helpline providing personalized support and resources. You can reach out today to speak with a compassionate resource specialist who will listen and help provide accurate sleep disorders information, resources to help navigate daily living and the healthcare landscape, and connect you with a certified sleep center and patient support organizations. Contact the Sleep Helpline at 1-800-819-2043 or by filling out a form on our website at project-sleep.com.
My next question for you is about your inspiration. Did you have any favorite artists or writers that really have inspired you?
Yes. Okay. Frida Kahlo, she's my girl. I am obsessed with her. She is a Hispanic artist, and she was disabled, and through her journey with like her declining health, she depicted like her struggles through art, and she was able to like, lay in bed and keep painting even in her worst like hours of suffering and pain. She was able to turn that into something beautiful, and even a beautiful, but also you can sense her pain through her paintings. And that was just something that really inspired me. The fact that even through her struggles, she was able to do what she did and make the kind of art that she did as a disabled person. And so I felt because inspired by her, because I felt like I could do it. If she could do it, then I could do it too. And yeah, I just love her and I love her work.
And now is that mostly oil painting or is that acrylic? I really don't
I
know.
I believe it's oil painting. I also have her journals. They published like some of her journals, and she painted in her journals. I'm not sure what the medium is, but it is really pretty. She does just like painting on the page, and like painting words and poems and things.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. And she's kind of a little bit of a surrealist in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you feel like, actually, this wasn't a question I had prepared, but do you feel like your visual arts or your writing has evolved over the last couple of years?
Definitely. I my writing especially, I feel like the more that I write creatively, the more I realize how I was educated with like I have a science background. And so we're supposed to write in like passive language because we're focusing on the subject rather than the experience. For example, like in research publications, you're supposed to be focusing on like what's happening in the experiment, not the perception of the scientist, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So as I continue to write, I've had to learn how to describe my, perception and less of the world around me. And that has been an interesting journey in itself.
That is such an interesting and cool journey to be on. Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting, it reminds me, I co-authored a journal paper with a researcher, and the journal accepted it, but then they said there was a big problem, which was I'd written my section about my experience using the word I.
Mhm.
I do this, I do that. And they said, well, the word I really isn't allowed in the journal article.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Interesting.
they ended up working with us, and what they did is they put my story in like a side box, so it wasn't technically part of the paper.
Uh-huh.
But still, so it was still prominently right there
Yeah.
alongside the other writing. So that was like a kind of an interesting eye-opening experience for me, because I actually came from more of the creative nonfiction writing background where you talk about yourself all day.
Right.
So
That's valid.
yeah. And as a visual artist, do you think your style has changed, or have you been, interested in different mediums at all?
Okay, so when I first started art, I was really focused on the outcome rather than the experience of making it. And I was a perfectionist, I guess. And now I've become less of a perfectionist and more focused on like making art as a way for me to like stay grounded, and making art as a way to like depict maybe like an emotion rather than being focused on every tiny little detail and being too attached to like an outcome. And because of that, I feel like I've been able to, stick with it. Because when I'm a perfectionist, it makes me only want to do art when I feel like I can do it perfectly. But being willing to just let it turn out how it turns out makes it so that I am able to have less anxiety about making art and just make it as a way to have less anxiety about life.
I mean, these are life lessons. They're so important. When you said like to express an emotion, I love that idea. Kind of makes me want to start over, although that's not the point. You said,
Exactly.
yeah.
You let it come out how it's supposed to come out.
How does hiking or your outdoor environment inspire your art?
I feel like hiking has been a really big inspiration for my art because nature is just so gorgeous. It makes me feel so at home and at peace with myself and the world around me. And just like the birds, they all look different. The trees, they all look different. The sky looks different every single second, like depending on when the clouds are moving. And so being able to like bring that attitude to my artwork, like if my tree that I'm painting turns out a little funny, I mean, there are funny looking trees out there. Like they don't all look like, perfectly straight up and down with like, you know, three branches and like perfect like scruffy leaves. Like they have broken branches. They have lichen and like scruffiness going on. They're funny looking too. So my art can be funny looking because nature is funny looking.
I love that. When you go hiking, do you bring, okay. I was thinking about watching a beautiful sunset recently in San Diego, but this not natural at all, terrible inclination to just spend the whole time photographing it with my phone as opposed to actually enjoying it. And it was actually someone nearby saying, "Oh my gosh, look at how that cloud formation," and like when they were talking about it, it helped me just actually look at it
Uh-huh.
and just enjoy it as opposed to trying to document it. So I just kind of wonder, do you try to stay present, or, a mix with your phone and taking pictures or not?
Yeah, I wish that I could accurately take pictures of outdoor stuff, but I'm not a photographer as much as I wish I could be. So mostly I try to like take pictures with my eyes, like try to record it like in my head because I feel like that is more of an accurate depiction of what's going on outside that I can bring like back to my art or like save in my heart for when I'm having like a hard day and I'm not able to get outside and I need like a safe place to go internally. Nature, she's always there and she's always pretty and she doesn't always come across the same in pictures. In fact, very rarely.
I think that's so true, especially have about the moon. The moon can be
Oh my God.
so beautiful. And then you go, "Oh, I'm going to take a picture of this because," and then it looks so
It shrinks.
yeah. Do you bring any like night themes or I know you mentioned about the eyes and wakefulness, but I feel like I remember from a while ago seeing some really cool night themed work that you'd done.
Ooh, yeah, I've started doing more like gothic work. Like, I really, really like, I also really like painting like galaxies and stuff. And yeah, now that you say that, I do paint a lot of like night themed things. But it's funny, like, my art says more about me than I could ever say with my words, you know? And sometimes I don't realize what the message is exactly, but I can feel it and see it.
Well, it's pretty amazing that you lean into both writing and visual arts. I've never thought of myself as a visual artist. I always thought I have to explain my feelings through my words. So I love that you talk about being able to, and that there's so much you can show visually. Even some of what we were talking about on our social media was about how, a picture tells 1,000 words. Like it's just so powerful. Images are powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So for your upcoming publications, how did you get involved in like, because it's going to be a group of in the book it comes out in May, that's going to be a collection, right? Of different,
Mm-hmm.
how did you
Yeah.
get involved in that?
So I know Christine Reed. She's the publisher of that book collection. And she published her memoir called Alone in Wonderland and actually sent it to me. She messaged me over Instagram about it and was so kind as to mail me a copy. And I read her book and fell in love with it. And I just remember I was camping in that little Arizona mountain town that I was living at after all of the crazy stuff happened in my life. And just being like so happy with just reading her experience and so impressed with the concept of being like an outdoors person, even though I was camping alone and like I don't often feel like I'm an outdoors person. So I started attending like her writers groups. They're like bi-weekly and we just got to know each other and she's been a real inspiration for keeping up on my writing and actually like making words happen and that's what we when we tell each other we got to make words happen. And so that support group, it's not a support group, but that support system has been really helpful in keeping me accountable. And she's just awesome. And so when she mentioned that she was wanting to publish a collection of essays of outdoors people who lead in the outdoors, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta get a submission in. And so I submitted an essay called As Nature Is, and I included 2 poems of which depict like my experience of disability in the outdoors. And I didn't know this until later, but like there were hundreds of submissions and I was one of 26 to get picked. And I even asked her like, did you just pick mine because we're friends? And she was like, no, I genuinely like loved your perspective and wanted to include it in the book. So that kind of like made me blush a little bit. I don't know. Just when people compliment my writing, I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, she's amazing. And I'm really excited. I haven't been able to read other people's essays, so I am really excited to actually get a copy of the book and be able to read everyone's words, because so far I've just read mine, and I'm really interested to see what they made.
That story just kind of gives me chills. I think it's so cool to hear about, different sources of inspiration for you and connection and community. And yeah, I think that's just amazing. And I mean, outdoor. So what makes someone an outdoors person though? I mean,
I think just going out and enjoying the outdoors. Because as disabled people, we aren't often able to enjoy the outdoors as long or in the same ways that able-bodied people are. I go on a hike and I start having a sleep attack within, 20, 30 minutes. I sit down, I take my little nap, and then I just keep walking. And I think what makes you an outdoors person is just the fact that you get out and enjoy. Do you enjoy the outdoors? Yes, then you're an outdoors person.
yeah. Well, that's what I was thinking originally, but then I think you said you didn't consider yourself necessarily one.
In the beginning,
Yeah.
it's like an internal conflict sometimes. I just feel I invalidate myself in that way, and I have to remind myself, like, no, you are an outdoors person.
Yeah.
Even if your experience of the outdoors doesn't look exactly like other people's.
Right. Has narcolepsy changed your intuition?
I read this book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, I believe, and it talks about how your first gut instinct is often, well, mostly like the most correct version because your brain does so many micro calculations without you knowing it. Like it will just automatically give you the right answer at first. And so, like, sitting and like over evaluating things is oftentimes like not a good idea in terms of like making good decisions, because your first impression is the most accurate. So with narcolepsy, I don't have as much brain power to be making like all of those tiny little reasonings. I've had to learn how to like trust my gut instinct. And also with dreaming, weirdly, I dream so much. Every night I'm constantly having like these crazy vivid dreams all night long, even though they're not scary anymore because I'm on, oh, well, actually that's not true. Even though I don't have like as much sleep paralysis anymore and they're not like scary and painful that way, I still am able to like get a glimpse into my subconscious in a way that's different from the average person, because normal people don't dream as much as people with narcolepsy. Like we're constantly having like intrusive REM sleep, dream sleep. And so for me, I'm able to like wake up and like analyze, well, what is this dream telling me? Like, what could it possibly mean? And sometimes, like, if I just think about it and sit with it, it's able to show me what's really going on beneath the surface level of, my life. And I kind of have just had to learn how to trust it in a weird way, even though it's unpleasant.
So I guess for me, I still, at least some of my naps leave me in, I don't know if I mean, I'm sure I was sort of like dreaming, but I just end up in a really grumpy mood. And I've learned not to trust that as much because I can lean in really quickly if I just woke up from a nap to some like strong negativity. So I try not to lean too much into that. I've learned that's not generally accurate. I give myself time to readjust to this world and then realize actually things are okay. Have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah, dude. When I get sleepy, I turn into a toddler. I get weepy. I get angry. I just have like more like my emotions are stronger. So learning like emotional regulation has been a journey and continues to be. But sometimes I just get like weepy and I'm like, oh, I need a nap. I am a toddler. I need a nap.
Yeah.
There's a lot we don't understand about, the human brain just in general. Even though we do understand a lot about it, we also don't understand a lot about it. So with dreaming, I just feel like I'm able to perceive the inner workings of my mind in a really special way. And I try to be appreciative of that instead of focusing on the negative aspects of it.
Have you ever painted one of your dreams?
Trying to think. I'd say technically yes, because when I'm painting and I'm falling asleep, I can like see what I want how I want the painting to turn out, and so I lean into that inspiration. It's kind of hard to explain, but how we hallucinate. So like I'll have like hallucinations of the painting turning out how I want it to turn out, or like of it like, and I try to shape it. It's almost like an internal reference.
I love that. I remember when I was in law school, there was a student that had had narcolepsy before me at the school. So I really lucked out because, usually a lot of people are like often the school's not familiar with narcolepsy and
Yeah.
they don't respond well because they're not familiar. I benefited from someone else that had gone through that experience. And I'd heard the story later that that student had often fallen asleep as they were like finishing papers and stuff, and then thinking they've emailed them in, sent their assignment in, and then later realized that they hadn't. And then the school thought that the student was lying, and that doctor had to call the school and say, like, you really don't understand what this person is, and I can't imagine sort of thinking that you've completed something
Mm-hmm.
in your hallucination. And what you just said about finishing like seeing a version of the artwork in a fuller form or further along kind of reminded me of that. Have you ever woken up and been like, gosh, I guess I didn't get as far?
Yeah, because as beautiful as my visions are, sometimes I'm just not quite capable of hearing them out.
Yep. I don't know how often, but this has happened at least a few times that in my head, I'm composing the most beautiful music. And I'm like, oh my God, I am the world's best composer. And
Yes.
also at the same time, realizing that I'm not awake and saying, when I wake up, I'm going to write this down. And then waking up and having no ability to really
Remember it
yeah,
or write it down.
right. But it was really beautiful when it was happening.
Dude, I've had those too. Like making up music as you're dreaming. I wish there was a way for us to record that, because dream symphonies.
Ooh, I love that name even. Dream symphonies.
Yes.
Yeah, and for me, it's a lot of classical, which is not something I listen to very much. I wouldn't call
Uh-huh.
myself a classical connoisseur, but I do wonder, like, about like, is that something about our brains being kind of older in time or slow to catch up? I've always wondered, and I don't know why I'm asking you, but you're a sciencey person and art person, and I've had this fascination with why the particular emotions that cause cataplexy cause it, because they do
Mhm.
seem very particular to me. And I don't think that I've seen much research that's really delved into more like, why is it those specific emotions?
Right. Like, what are your main triggers?
Laughter when things are funny, but also when I'm annoyed. I
Mhm.
There's something to me that I've never been able to find articulated, which is I often think it's about a duality of emotion.
Uh-huh.
Like, not just that I think something's funny, but like knowing that my best friend will also think it's funny.
Oh, so like leaning into like the emotion leading to like an action, maybe?
Maybe. Or
So
like that human connection of, but I like what you said. Yeah, maybe.
because the purpose of like the paralysis when we're dreaming is to keep us from acting out our dreams. So like with anger, like the purpose of anger is to make us like defend ourselves. For example, like the purpose of laughter, I guess, when we laugh, like I don't know, we have like external versions of it. So like both of those emotions end in an action happening afterwards. So I don't know. I mean, that's just my theory off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Because I don't really have cataplexy when I'm sad, but that's just me.
Well, to me, it's like there's just something about also, I find like if I'm annoyed with something, trying to pretend I'm not annoyed, like my roommate saying, oh, sorry, I'm taking up so much of the freezer with my stuff. And I'm thinking, yeah, you are. But then I try to say instead, oh, it's no problem.
So with annoyance, like that emotion shows that you're needing to like assert yourself in some way. I'm just thinking from like a caveman perspective.
Yeah.
Like, which our brains, they're very old, you know, evolutionary wise. So like possessiveness and stuff, you would want to like lash out and result in like an action that helps you to protect your asset or whatever. I don't know. With annoyance, anyways, that also leads to an action that emotion is designed to.
I love it. Oh, I didn't know if you want to share any passages of work with us.
Yeah, so I asked Christine Reed, the publisher, if I could share one of my poems from my piece, and she said yes. So I'm going to share it with you. And this is the one that talks about narcolepsy in the outdoors. So here we go. I'm not religious anymore, but I am spiritual. The trees are my new gods. I was reborn at the base of their trunks, in the sleepy mountain town of Pine Top, Arizona. Nature was beautiful there. So close to town, you could taste the forest in its veins. Here, I hiked a rugged trail to a viewpoint of the Magellan Rim. My only companion, a furry four-legged friend, a sleek and bright German shepherd. Ponderosa pines whisper around us. The dirt and rock are gritty beneath us. We sit at the end of the trail, where we watch the bandstands sway with the wind, overlooking a vast valley of stately trees. I smile at passers-by. I feel safe as rain with my dog lying at my side. So I write bad poetry and soak in the sunshine, the breeze, the ease with which my lungs breathe. But narcolepsy, she is always there to weight my lids heavily. Before long, my eyes begin to blink in the sun. It shudders like a camera, from bright to dark, over and over, until darkness overcomes. When I wake, the world is still there, both loud and quiet. The birdsong chirps brightly. I hold on tightly.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Of course.
Guys, how special of a moment. Oh my gosh. There's so many beautiful parts.
I'm excited for y'all to read the whole piece. You can watch for updates at my Instagram. My tag is author Tatiana Maria.
Okay, I was wondering if there was a new Instagram in the mix.
Yes. So that one that's specifically dedicated for book reviews and to like keep people updated on my works in progress and publication.
Yay! We're so excited. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today and taking this time. We know time and energy is limited.
Indeed.
And all around appreciation. So thank you again. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks, Tatiana.
The Project Sleep podcast is produced by Carver Sound Productions. For more information on podcast production services, visit carversoundproductions.com.